What's up, everybody? It's your boy Ryan, and this is the Thunder Channel on nootropics, on testosterone, on performance. Subscribe to the channel if you're into our content. Hit the bell to get notified of all the notifications. If you are into nootropics, we have two of them, which you can find at livecortex.com. They are exceptionally powerful for brain energy. And if you need to hire me for coaching, you can also do that at livecortex.com. All right, so right into it, folks. And yeah, fittingly, I'm wearing my muscle shirt. I did this specifically so that you can enjoy looking at my guns. All right, so so what I want to do is in this video, look, I think there's a lot of apprehension, and rightfully so, from the perspective of many men who are thinking about going on TRT. And a lot of that is based on a lot of the sort of common stuff that you may hear, like, oh, well, I have to go on it forever. Am I going to have to inject every day? I'm afraid of needles. You know, is TRT bad for your heart health? And hosts of other things. So I want to address each of the concerns that most men have to kind of show you that in a lot of cases, either your sort of concerns are illogical or they can easily be countered. Now, look, I'll also say that TRT isn't necessarily for everyone. You have to make an individual choice, looking at your age, looking at your blood work, and looking at what you want for yourself as a man in the future. But for a lot of guys, it's going to change your life in a variety of ways, including energy, libido, strength, having conquer energy, confidence, and hosts of other things. All right, so off the bat, okay, let's start with the low-hanging fruit, and the most predominant question is, will I have to be on TRT forever? A lot of guys think you go on testosterone, that's it, you've made the commitment, and you're in for life. The answer to the question of whether or not you're going to need to be on TRT forever is actually no. Yeah, plenty of guys get on TRT for a year, 2 years, 5 years even, and then decide, hey, you know, they want to have kids or they just want to get off of it for one reason or another. They want to go back to being natural. And then they use something like Clomid to basically PCT, where you jumpstart your own endogenous gonadotropin production, and then you start making your own test again. Now, yes, as is, you know, the regulatory homeostatic feedback mechanism in the endocrine system of a man, once you go on TRT, you're basically instructing the hypothalamus that you have enough testosterone and therefore not to pump out gonadotropin releasing hormone and LH and FSH. So you do cease fire on making your own testosterone, but you're supplementing with it. And we'll get to sperm and fertility here in a second. But I guess the real question is, so yeah, you can get off TRT at any time. It may be a little bit of a rough transition because you're going to be used to certain levels of testosterone and certain levels of stimulatory neurotransmitters. But if you're timing it right with something like Clomid, then you'll probably be in good shape. But I guess the real question is, look, if TRT is so good, why would guys go off of it? Well, I'll tell you why. There's many reasons, but I think the most prominent one is, you know, I've seen this in my consulting practice, is that many clinics will offer suggestions and start you on very, very high doses that are unnecessarily high. And that's usually in like the 180 to 200. I've seen clinics go as high as suggesting or prescribing 220 milligrams of testosterone per week for men. Now, whether they do this for revenue's sake or they're just trying to sort of surge you with super physiological levels of testosterone right away because you've been starved of androgens for a long time, up in the air. I mean, I have my opinions on that, but we'll leave that out of this video. But starting on these exceptionally high weekly doses of testosterone is likely to lead to both supraphysiological levels of test and therefore supraphysiological amount of estradiol via the conversion of test to estrogen. And that can come with side effects. So men usually end up teeter-tattering and switching their doses and not getting properly dialed in, and that's usually because they started far too high. But the intelligent thing to do is start anywhere from 120 milligrams to 160 milligrams a week and see how you fare and go from there. In that small, kind of tight dose range, you have a great ability to adjust if you need to, but you're more than likely not going to be too high, pumping out excessive levels of testosterone and then having some of the ensuing conversion to estrogen and potential side effects as a result. All right, so that's point number one, or skepticism number one, addressed. Let's talk about the second one, which is a major one, which is, doesn't TRT make you infertile? You know, I mean, that's a deal breaker for a lot of guys, right? The answer is yes and no, right? So yes, it is true that testosterone is going to, you having adequate levels of exogenous testosterone is going to signal to the hypothalamus to make little or no gonadotropin releasing hormone, and you'll be pumping out a lot less, next to no, LH and FSH, which means you won't be endogenously making intratesticularly at least, testosterone. At the same time, you're also not going to be making adequate amounts of sperm. So yes, you will be less fertile on just TRT. Now, the great thing is most, if not all, TRT clinics, or even like your doctor who's an endocrinologist these days, have the ability to and are more likely to prescribe you, if you want it, something like HCG, gonadorelin, or Clomid. And these are essentially gonadotropin replacement chemicals that allow you to stay fertile, make some of your own endogenous tests, but importantly, importantly, make your own sperm in the Sertoli cells of the testicles. And then with something like HCG or gonadorelin as an example, you'll also be continuing to produce in the adrenal glands DHEA, pregnenolone, the neurosteroids that help balance out libido. But importantly, I mean, if you're taking HCG with testosterone, which is very, very common, and in fact, again, most clinics prescribe this and suggest this, then yeah, I mean, you're going to be sending agonism right to the LH-FSH receptors in the Sertoli cells, and they are going to make sperm, and you're going to be fertile as hell. And, your ball size is going to stay the same. So yeah, if you're just doing standalone TRT, your internal or your endogenous testosterone production is going to shut down, but that could easily be supplemented with something like HCG. Number 3, and this is, believe it or not, like considering we're all men, people would be like, really, this is like how guys are, but a lot of guys are scared of needles. Scared to inject, just like, I don't know, am I going to hit a blood vessel or a vein? Am I going to bleed? Is it going to make me lightheaded? Is there side effects to this? And I think, I'll address some of those latter questions, but I think the first major point is, look, if you're scared to inject, the truth of the matter, man to man, is if you want to improve your sex drive, your erection quality, your overall health, your energy, your stimulant neurotransmitter synthesis, that sort of conquer orientation and confidence to get things done as a man in this life, then quite frankly, you're going to have to get over that. And these days, like, a person doesn't have to once a week inject some giant needle into their fucking quad or something. You could execute a more frequent regimen, which is very popular, and there is literature behind it, but importantly, there's a lot of anecdotals of it stabilizing hematocrit and keeping people in a very healthy, stable range of all these hormone markers. You could execute a more frequent regimen, like every third day, every other day, or every day of subcutaneous microinjections. The sub-Q injections are just under the skin. They're done with a very, very small insulin needle. You barely feel it. I mean, it's like less scary than a finger prick. You're not hitting the muscle. You're injecting right into the subcutaneous tissue, right? And if you're doing it somewhere in your quad area, like your thigh, I mean, that's kind of rough skin. So it's like you barely feel it. And subcutaneous microinjections of testosterone often treat men better because they have less, peaks and troughs. They have less highs and lows. I mean, if you're injecting intramuscularly once a week, or God forbid, once every 2 weeks, well, then you have this surge of testosterone. You have a major peak in estradiol ensuing shortly thereafter. And then toward the latter end of that time period, like, your serum concentrations start to dip, and then you're going to be making less stimulant neurotransmitters. You're going to feel less energized. Like, people always speak about these sort of peaks and troughs because they are real. But if you're injecting more frequently and doing sub-Q, first of all, you don't really run into those issues. You have stable serum levels of, androgens and estradiol. Stable meaning they're not like shooting up to super physiological levels and then dropping back down to like 400 or 500 nanograms per deciliter on a trough. And if you're doing subcutaneous injections, they're painless. They're virtually painless. Again, way less scary than a finger prick. I'd rather do a subcutaneous testosterone injection than a fucking finger prick, dude. Those hurt. Which brings me to my next point. Do you have to inject every day? I mean, is that the most optimal? I think guys think that's going to be like cumbersome or something. And, yeah, I mean, that's a rightful thought to have. And frankly, the answer to that question is, I mean, for some people, subcutaneous daily microinjections are going to be better. Not necessarily for everybody, though. There's plenty of people that just like their once every week or once every fourth day intramuscular injection. They get that surge of catecholamines. They have energy. Their libido's in a great place. They've been doing it for years, in which case they should just stick with that. But, the subcutaneous injections every day, it's like, it just becomes another thing. It's like putting your shoes on, you take your supplement regimen. I mean, you make coffee every day. Like, does that bother you? After the gym or whenever you eat breakfast, you got to fucking fire up a pan, put some olive oil on it, throw some eggs on it, put some broccoli in it, maybe some spices, toast some toast, all that. It's a regimen. It takes time, right? I mean, adding a 2-minute, which is usually how long it takes me to inject testosterone, and most people that I know, injection of testosterone into the regimen is really not a big deal. All right. So you're going to have to get over that. So I'm on TRT. I've been on TRT for quite some time now, and I started off doing intramuscular injections every 4th day. I recently made the switch to subcutaneous microinjections, and I got to say, though there's a little bit less of an initial stimulation because the fat tissue is dispersing testosterone a lot differently, or at least a little differently than the muscles disperse the testosterone, which is often quicker. And I realized on the every 4th day intramuscular injections, just as I had come to understand in consultations with men and research over the years, yeah, I mean, I was having a little bit of an energy dip toward the latter end of that period, particularly because serum test levels were dropping just a bit, and also neurotransmitter synthesis, at least the stimulant ones, norepinephrine, dopamine, etc., were at lower concentrations. So while subcutaneous daily microinjections are not necessarily the best route for everyone. You know, for a lot of people, look, if it's going to benefit you in the way that you have stable levels of serum test, meaning your testosterone is not fluctuating in any major way, you just have kind of even keel of test, even keel of predictable conversion to estradiol, which is very important for libido's sake, then yeah, inject every day. Don't bitch about it. Takes 2 minutes. Go on your way. Number 5, and this is a really important one, dude, for guys that have hair. What about hair loss? Are you going to lose hair because you got these super physiological levels of DHT and that's going to fuss with your hair follicles and your scalp and then you're going to be bald? Not necessarily true, because again, the old days where you could only inject once a week or once every 2 weeks are long gone. And the research is, though DHT and excessive levels of DHT is a major contributor to hair loss, or really the acceleration of existing male pattern baldness genetically, that's the real truth of the matter. There's such a thing as sort of temporary androgenic alopecia, which is ultimately what this is, which is a hormonal shock from super physiological levels of testosterone and then them dropping over the ensuing 6 or 7 days. And that causes hair loss, right? So the more frequently you're injecting, the lot less of a bolus of DHT you're going to get. And for a lot of guys, they're going to lose next to no hair executing that method. So no, TRT is not a death wish for your hair, despite what you may have read. I think you have to ask people what their protocols are. If you're reading in a forum, guys are like, oh yeah, no, you're just going to have to fucking deal with it. Shave your head, dude. Come to the bald club. You know, a lot of guys are just sort of haphazardly saying that, but you look at their dose, it's 210 milligrams. It's way higher than they should be, and they're injecting like once a week intramuscularly. Yeah, on top of a proclivity for male pattern baldness, if you're executing that regimen, you're going to have higher levels of DHT, you know, at certain times in that, you know, duration in that period, and you're going to lose more hair. Whereas if you're injecting sub-Q administrations daily, you have a lot less bolus DHT, which is going to make it so that you either lose next to no hair or no hair at all. Number 6, and this is kind of one that I see like with some of my clients that have, you know, gotten on TRT either under my guidance or, you know, otherwise. How am I supposed to travel like on testosterone? You know, especially if I'm injecting every day, like if I got to take a plane to fucking LA or wherever, like what do I got to do? Bring it in a lunchbox or something? And is it legal to have? Like, am I going to be harassed by TSA? And the answer is no. TSA is not going to harass you. Look, testosterone replacement therapy is a legally prescribed medicine. So as long as you have your prescription with you, it goes where you go, legally and rightfully. There's nothing else to it. And yeah, and most testosterone preparations are going to be just fine in room temperature. If you happen to have a testosterone preparation that, you know, requires refrigeration, I don't know, take a small lunchbox with you and an ice pack. All right, just like man up and do what has to be done. 7, and this is a really important one because I think this is one of the biggest things that I guess derail people from going on testosterone, and that is what about the fact that testosterone can be unhealthy for your heart? You know, the common knowledge around this is that testosterone raises hematocrit and makes you make more red blood cells. So I would say excessive levels of testosterone certainly have the ability to do this, which is why you don't want to start off one of these cookie cutter protocols that has you at 210 milligrams, which I think is ridiculous for most men. What it always ends up being, like for some of these biomarkers, is that guys are on too high of a dose. So you see flooded in the TRT community scores of anecdotals of people being like, yeah, you know, my hematocrit was kind of creeping past the 50 or so range, and then I lowered my dose from 190 milligrams to 160, and what do you know? It's back down to normal. Or I kept the same dose, but I switched to daily subcutaneous microinjections and my hematocrit leveled out. One thing, however, is very clear, and that is there is a substantial risk of cardiac and otherwise health problems as a man as you age when you have low levels of testosterone. And if you haven't been digging into the research on the matter, testosterone itself is profoundly anti-inflammatory, and if you're up on some of the more modern current research on things like heart disease and even cancer, a lot of this is driven by, you guessed it, inflammation. But another thing, a lot of guys think that like testosterone is the cure-all for all their issues. They start getting on TRT and 7 weeks later, they're like, why do I still feel like shit? People think that they'll just be bulletproof and they don't have to maintain like a good healthy diet of a breakdown of macros and micronutrients, good sleep, like next to no drinking. And guys will go on TRT thinking, all right, I'm fucking He-Man now, bro. You know, and they have unhealthy diet, sleep patterns, you know, they're drinking too much and they end up feeling like shit or having skewed biomarkers, you know, and then they go, testosterone is bad for me. It's making me unhealthy, man. No, your evening booze is making you unhealthy. The fact that 17 out of 21 of your meals that you eat throughout the week are processed bullshit is making you unhealthy. The fact that you don't do any degree of weightlifting or cardio, you smoke too much fucking pot, and you aren't managing your caloric intake, your micronutrient intake, or in some cases your water intake is why you are not healthy. Like if you're a healthy dude with a super optimized baseline, then you add testosterone on top of that, I mean, there's no limits to what you can do and how you can feel. Last major point is this is kind of another prominent question or contention that people have about testosterone is TRT isn't natural, and I want to stay natural. I totally understand that. And by the way, every single contention here, I fully understand that guys have these sort of this skepticism and this apprehension. Totally okay. That's why I wanted to address that stuff in this video. But look, I mean, the idea of like wanting to stay natural is a little bogus, and I'm going to tell you why. Look, my story of keeping my testosterone at adequate levels in my late 30s was kind of like a painstaking one. Now, look, I take a lot of supplements and I'm into biohacking and I love it, right? I like understanding each individual compound's mechanism of action and how it contributes to a larger whole of a goal. But like, to keep my testosterone at levels that are adequate for me prior to going on TRT, which is around 900 nanograms per deciliter, somewhere around the middle of the reference range free testosterone, I had to take 20, 25 supplements, everything from L-carnitine, L-tartrate, to intermittent cycles of Fedosia agrestis, to Panax ginseng, to 9-MEBC to keep the dopamine testosterone loop in check, to zinc to manage estradiol, to red light therapy on my balls, to icing my balls, to obviously lifting heavy weights, to refraining from large scale masturbation, fenugreek, Tongat Ali, maca, tribulus, all that stuff. Like I was taking a very defined protocol, which was working for me, but look, it was 20 fucking supplements. And I think you have to ask the question when you're thinking like, is TRT natural? I want to stay natural. Well, are 20 supplements that you're taking natural? Look, maybe you're into supplements, like totally cool. I love supplements, but it was a good idea for me to remove 20 things, just about, and then just bring in one additional thing. Pretty awesome, right? I mean, that's how I'm looking at it. So those are 8 of the primary concerns that most men have when going on TRT. I just wanted to address them for folks that are thinking about going on testosterone. Look, there's many more, including, I don't know, will I get acne, etc. And yeah, maybe, and that'll depend on estradiol numbers, on your testosterone numbers. I mean, there's plenty of creams that you can use to kind of alleviate that, or modifying your dose or frequency, which should take that away. There's cases of people that have insomnia or anxiety, or they do not sleep very well when they're on TRT, and that is almost exclusively due to too high of a dose. And then you got hyperactivation of the sympathetic nervous system, and you're pumping out catecholamines like crazy, particularly norepinephrine. Then yeah, I mean, you're not going to sleep very well when that's the case, which is why you have to manage your dose. The one drawback, I mean, I think there are some drawbacks. One of the primary drawbacks is like, it's not just like you get a dose, you inject it, and you're fucking done. You're taking your health into your own hands here, and you're taking your optimization into your own hands. So look, that comes with the necessity for a degree of specificity and nuance on your side. If you're one of those people that just wants a cookie cutter approach and you want to kind of be done with it, I would urge you to look at yourself as a man. Take responsibility for this stuff, man. I mean, you want to be as optimal as possible, and that's going to mean in some cases with testosterone. I mean, look, some doses are going to be like your first dose will be perfect. You'll be on it for 10 years, 20 years, ride off happily into the sunset. But in other cases, you may have to dial in your dose, and that's perfectly okay. You're going to need to be a master at changing doses, looking at labs, etc. anyway, so you're going to want to get it over with right away. Hope that's been useful. If you need to hire me for anything related to TRT, whether it's dialing in your protocol, questions about getting on TRT, interpreting your lab work, or otherwise, you can do that at livecortex.com. It's one of the major things that I do. Otherwise, we've got 2 powerful nootropic products that support this broadcast, but are importantly my inventions. These are my babies. I love them. I take them mostly every day. They are the following. Number 1, the Cortex Stack. Now, this is a motivation and dopamine energy centered nootropic. It's a very strong inducer of verbal fluency and the drive to do things. You're either going to want to clean your house or get 5 hours of work done. And you can buy a bottle of that stack at livecortex.com or in the description of this video. Secondarily, and I wanted to make an announcement, I just got the tap on the shoulder that we need to move 200 bottles of Torque. We just got a new batch of a lot of Torque. So I looked at the numbers and I'm like, you know what? We can move a lot of these for a significant discount. So my loss is your gain right now on the Torque nootropic stack. This is fire energy, 6 to 8 hours of clean, stimulant brain performance. One of the most purchased nootropic stacks on the internet, the Torque stack, 30% off. My loss, your gain. Coupon code 30TORQUE. 30 Torque. All right, you hit that at checkout. It'll literally take 30% off of the amount of the product. We need to sell 200 bottles of Torque. So starting now, it's the countdown. All right, we got to get rid of 200 bottles. at 30% off. Use the coupon code 30TORQ and go get yourself a powerful nootropic stack for cheap. LiveCortex.com or description below. It's been a pleasure hanging out with you guys. I hope I've cleared up some of your apprehensions or skepticism or thoughts. Please subscribe to the channel if you're into anything that we talked about here today, and I will talk to you on the next one.